Before you step back into Derry, there's a lot you should remember and a lot more that you should know about the cursed town's long, dark history that's all but plagued with numerous kinds of horror. Without knowing how those terrifying events all tie together, you wouldn't be able to fully relish the scary meal that Welcome to Derry is supposed to be. That's why, in this video, we're going to take you through an uber-comprehensive recap that will not only cover Stephen King's original novel, the miniseries, and the 2 movies, but you'll also learn about the differences these installments had compared to the book. We'll also talk about all the intricate details that'll be prerequisite if you want to fully catch the references, understand the history, and appreciate just how deeply Pennywise's evil runs in that cursed town. Of course, we won't spoil any surprises from the new series, but we will refresh your memory about the past carnage and key players, so without extending this intro a second longer than we have to, let's begin. Oh, and before we get into things, we do have a very quick request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. It's a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Stephen King's It, 1986 novel. Of course, the horror of Pennywise the Clown, or the entity that takes the form of this clown, started as far back as 1986 with Stephen King's novel It. The story follows 7 misfit kids from Derry, Maine in the late 1950s who call themselves the Losers Club. There's Bill, the stuttering leader, Bev, the lone girl with a more than troubled life at home, then there's Richie, the jokester, Eddie, the sickly worrywart, and Stan, the skeptic, along with Ben, the new shy kid, and finally Mike, an outsider who loves history. These kids discover that their town is haunted by It, a shape-shifting, child-killing entity that most often appears as Pennywise the dancing clown. Needless to say, Pennywise isn't a clown at all. Instead, It is an ancient, otherworldly creature that awakens roughly every 27 years to quite literally feed on people's fears and devour children. The entity can read your mind, take on the form of what you're most afraid of, and even warp reality around the town of Derry. In short, this thing is the granddaddy of all things nightmarish. That's putting it lightly. Now, the novel takes place in basically a couple of different time periods. First, we got the losers' childhood in and around 1957 through 58, and then they reunite exactly 27 years later when the kids have grown into adults, some successfully, but others not so much. As kids, the losers each encounter Pennywise in different terrifying guises. Bill sees the ghost of his little brother Georgie, who, by the way, was its very first victim in the book. Beverly hears the voices of dead children in her bathroom before blood erupts from the sink. Eddie is stalked by a diseased leper, while Richie and Ben are chased by classic movie monsters, a werewolf for Richie and a mummy for Ben. Through these hauntings, they manage to figure out Derry's horrific truth and conclude that an evil being has been murdering kids for centuries, and the adults either don't see it or willfully ignore it. But the thing is, in Derry, horrific events have a way of being swept under the rug, and people remember bad things if asked, but don't attach importance to them. It's like the whole town is under a spell of denial, which of course can't be good for anybody. Eventually, the Losers Club bands together in 1958 to hunt down It in the sewers beneath Derry. They learn from Mike's research that It has struck before. Now, here's where it gets interesting from the perspective of the upcoming TV show. You see, King's novel includes eerie historical interludes of Derry's past and talks about a bloody massacre by the KKK and white supremacists at the Black Spot nightclub, a mysterious industrial explosion, and a mob shootout. And these were all disasters that can be linked to Pennywise. In fact, we'll talk about those massacres and mishaps in more detail in just a bit. Coming back to the losers though, deep below ground they face the otherworldly monstrosity in its lair. Amidst the sewer tunnels they encounter the Deadlights, the entity's true form of otherworldly glowing eyes. Young Bill performs an old ritual called the Ritual of Chud he once read about. In that ritual, you basically engage in a psychic battle of wills with the monster, kind of like how Sandman fought Lucifer if you watched the show or read the comics. When we open up in the 80s, we find the losers all grown up, although scattered across the country. But the most interesting part is that they have mostly forgotten about their trauma. This is nothing but that same old Derry amnesia at work, the amnesia that makes adults forget and ignore terrible and horrific things. But when Pennywise resurfaces, targeting a young gay man named Adrian Mellon in 1984, the child murders begin anew. Mike Hanlon, the only loser who stayed in Derry as the town librarian, contacts his old friends. One by one, Bill, Bev, Richie, Eddie, Ben, and Stan receive the dreaded call and recall their forgotten promise. Unfortunately, though, Stan is so terrified by the memory of it that he dies by suicide rather than return, and this tells us just how deep those childhood scars ran. The remaining 6 reunite in Derry, their bond still strong, prepare to face Pennywise again as adults. In the novel's climax, the losers descend into the sewers a second time. They confront it, which had taken on a monstrous new spider-like form, which, we gotta remind you, was also the closest approximation of its true shape in our world. During the course of the battle, if you can call it that, Bill and Richie nearly get lost in the deadlights, Eddie breaks an arm and sacrifices himself to injure the It entity, and Beverly's trusty slingshot and silver bullet finally help bleed the beast. The friends literally tear out the entity's heart and kill it for good. In the aftermath, a huge storm hits Derry, wrecking part of the town. It feels like the evil that sustained Derry is finally purged, and the town itself cracks like an eggshell. The losers, having kept their promise, soon begin to forget each other again, a bittersweet consequence of its influence fading. Only Mike remembers clearly, left to record the story of it, where the memories slip away once and for all. Of course, the impact of King's novel was massive. At over 1,100 pages, it had everything from coming-of-age nostalgia and friendships to pure horror and monstrous otherworldly creatures. Readers old and new tend to fall in love with the Losers Club because of just how grounded they are in reality and how they brave all threats and fight these threats when no adult would. The book won some awards, sure, but more importantly, it embedded Pennywise into our pop culture psyche, and Mr. King essentially reshaped the modern fear of clowns. Now, as promised earlier, before we move on to the 1990s miniseries and its events, we want to talk about 4 very specific incidents. The first of these is the 1740s vanishing colony, when an early Derry settlement disappeared without a trace, with over 300 men, women, and children just disappearing. There were no traces of a battle, disease, or migration, so where did all these people suddenly go? Well, it kind of resembles a Roanoke-like mystery. 300 people who disappeared were likely some of Pennywise's first big meals on the settlers of Derry. Later, we have the 1906 Kitchener Ironworks explosion, when, on an Easter Sunday, a children's egg hunt at the local ironworks turned into carnage. The facility inexplicably exploded. Over 100 people died, 88 of them kids, and witnesses later recalled seeing an odd clownish figure nearby just before the blast. In King's world, that was the entity, waking up and saying hello with a bang. As should be expected, this tragedy became one of Derry's infamous legends, complete with horrific sights like a boy's head found in a tree, hair matted with blood, and Easter chocolate. In the 1929 Bradley Gang Massacre, a group of gangsters came to Derry and got more than they bargained for. Townspeople, ordinary folk, formed a mob and gunned down the Bradley Gang in the street, vigilante style. Officially, it was as if it never happened and no arrests were made, leading to the incident being hushed up. But an old witness later told Mike Hanlon that he saw a farmer clown figure happily participating in the shootout. Pennywise was awake and egging on the bloodbath, feeding on the chaos and violence. But we believe the worst of these instances was the 1930 Black Spot Fire. The Black Spot was a nightclub built by Derry's African-American soldiers, a rare haven of joy and music in the era of segregation. A year after the Bradley shootout, a hate group called the Maine Legion of White Decency torched the Black Spot with people inside. The fire was unspeakably deadly, and amid the flames, survivors swore they saw a monstrous bird carrying balloons swooping down on those trying to escape. In King's work, that was it again, taking the form of a giant bird, one of Mike's father's worst childhood fears, literally adding fuel to the fire. In fact, it's also believed that the hatred of the Maine Legion of White Decency's men was further fueled by the entity, and yes, the Black Spot Fire marked the end of a 27-year cycle before the entity found itself back in hibernation until the next round of terror 27 years later. And as we mentioned earlier, this particular event is poised to play a big role in the new Welcome to Derry series. More on that later on. It 1990 miniseries. The first on-screen adaptation of It came in 1990 as a 2-part television miniseries on ABC. For many 80s and 90s kids, this was our introduction to Pennywise, and it left a permanent scar on our collective psyche. Horror legend Tim Curry donned the white grease paint, razor-toothed grin as Pennywise, effectively turned a network TV production into an unexpectedly scary and horrific event. The miniseries closely follows the novel's basic plot, so we won't get into that in great detail, but there were key differences and limitations due to the TV format. For one, the setting was updated and the childhood segment is set in 1960 and the adult reunion in 1990, and this was done to make it contemporary for the audience at the time. Also, because this aired on primetime television, a lot of the novel's more disturbing or fantastical elements had to be toned down or cut entirely. For example, the scene from the book where Beverly and the kids solidify their bond in the sewers through doing it was omitted. And yeah, we're not joking, that really happened in the book. It's a metaphor for how they grow up and become adults to escape Pennywise's clutches, but it's just weird, we're not going into it. In the miniseries, the kids instead solidify their friendship with a much more PG version of a blood oath. Well, actually, they each take a puff on Eddie's inhaler as a token oath. The cosmic lore of it, like the Macroverse, the Deadlights, and the entity's true spider form laying eggs, were largely left on the cutting room floor with very little attention given to them. Instead, the TV adaptation keeps Pennywise front and center as the embodiment of evil, a demonic clown that must be stopped. The miniseries didn't include the visceral hate crime murder of Adrian Mellon that opens the adult half of the book, and instead, it begins with a little girl on a tricycle being killed by Pennywise, a simpler scene to establish that it is back. The character of Henry Bowers, the crazed bully, is present as a kid, and he escapes the sewer, but his adult arc is trimmed down and his fate is much less gory on TV. He basically accidentally stabs himself in a scuffle rather than getting dispatched violently like in the book. Also, several secondary characters and monsters were cut for brevity, such as Patrick Hockstetter and the leper under the porch that terrorized Eddie. Story-wise, the miniseries hits most of the novel's major beats just in a streamlined way. Part 1 covers the losers as kids in 1960. We see Georgie's death, the group's formation, and encounters with Pennywise. The TV version shows Pennywise getting injured by the kids via a silver slingshot, retreating, but leaves out the deeper metaphysical battle from the book. Part 2 then jumps to 1990, when Mike summons the now adult losers back to Derry after a string of child killings signaling its return. The reunion has its tensions, of course, and we learn that Bill is now a successful writer, Beverly is stuck in an abusive marriage, etc., and yeah, Stan kills himself here as well. The remaining 6 regroup, share stories over the famous Chinese dinner, cue the fortune cookies sprouting eyeballs and claws, and they resolve to destroy Pennywise for good. The final fight brings them back into the sewers beneath Derry. This time, the monster appears in a gigantic spider-like form, which, although was a puppet effect and quite cheesy by today's standards, it still freaked out plenty of 90s kids. In what we can only describe as a chaotic battle, our heroes get ensnared by its spider legs and hypnotic deadlights. Eddie tragically loses his life attempting to repeat his childhood heroics, but in the end, the survivors manage to wound the creature, knock it down, and rip out its heart, killing Pennywise once and for all. The evil vanquished, they carry Eddie's body out silently and go their separate ways. The epilogue shows that Mike's memory and scars remain, but the others start forgetting the horror as they leave Derry. On an oddly uplifting note, however, Bill's wife, Audra, who was briefly taken by it and left catatonic, awakens thanks to a ride on Bill's childhood bike, Silver, and the two share a relieved kiss in the sunlight, which makes it a rare happy moment in an otherwise bleak tale. What the 1990 miniseries lacked in big-budget effects, I mean, the finale's rubbery spider creature isn't quite King Kong quality, let's say, it made up for that in atmosphere and performance. Tim Curry's portrayal of Pennywise became the stuff of legend. He plays the clown with a weird, sinister cheerfulness, something that Bill Skarsgård would later adopt, but Tim's performance as a falsetto-voiced balloon-offering jokester one minute, fanged predator with glowing eyes the next is commendable. Who can forget little Georgie in his yellow raincoat peering into that storm drain, only to see a clown's face emerge from the darkness? "Hiya, Georgie," Pennywise coos, eventually baring teeth and declaring with malicious glee, "We all float down here," as he drags the child down to a fate worse than death, which was kept mercifully off-screen. It's no exaggeration to say Curry set the bar for scary clowns. In fact, the It miniseries wasn't a huge critical hit at first. Reviews were mixed, and it has a modest 59% on Rotten Tomatoes, but it became a cult classic in large part due to Curry's Pennywise. While modest in production, the 1990 It miniseries left an outsized mark on pop culture. Stephen King himself was pleasantly surprised, saying he had half expected a disaster trying to condense his massive book, but the series turned out really good. A really ambitious adaptation, in his words, given the constraints. And now, let's move on to the 2017 adaptation. It, Chapter 1. After years of development, Pennywise finally came to the big screen in 2017 and once again became a horror phenomenon. Directed by Andy Muschietti, It Chapter 1 refashioned the loser's childhood story for a new era and a new generation of fans. Rather than the 1950s, the film is set in 1988 and 89, which lets it tap into 80s nostalgia vibes similar to Stranger Things, and you know what? It even stars Finn Wolfhard from Stranger Things as Richie, which is fitting. This time, only the kids' half of the saga is told, which was a smart move, as it gives the 7 young characters room to shine without jumping back and forth in time. The Losers Club dynamic is as heartwarming and funny as ever, which makes audiences genuinely care about these kids and dread what might happen to them. But make no mistake, 2017's It was far scarier and more intense than the 90s TV version. With an R rating and modern effects, the film delivered full-throttle horror that hadn't really been seen in a coming-of-age story before. Director Muschietti and cinematographer Chung Hoon Chung created a Derry that feels sunny and nostalgic one moment, blood-chillingly haunted the next. The opening scene alone was enough to proclaim that this new adaptation meant business. Little Georgie in his yellow raincoat chases his paper boat down a rainy street, and when it falls into a storm drain, he meets Pennywise, now portrayed by Bill Skarsgård. Skarsgård's Pennywise looks similar in concept, white face, orange hair, clown suit, but there's something profoundly off about it. A childlike sing-song voice, eyeballs that drift outward independently, and drool dripping off of razor teeth. In a sequence that shocked theatergoers, Pennywise entices Georgie, "You want a balloon?" and then rips the boy's arm off before dragging him into the sewer. Unlike the miniseries, the film shows this encounter, instantly raising the stakes. It Chapter 1 focuses on the Losers Club during that fateful summer when they first fight Pennywise. We watch Bill still grieving Georgie, Bev enduring abuse at home, the rest of the losers each facing their personal fears. Meanwhile, bully Henry Bowers and his goons torment the losers in broad daylight, which adds real-world danger on top of the supernatural threat. Eventually, the losers piece together that It is behind all of the town's child murders and that It awakens cyclically. The film briefly touches on Derry's dark past through library clippings that Ben researches, mentioning tragedies like a mysterious Easter egg hunt explosion that killed dozens of children. Armed with this knowledge and a lot of carnage, the losers decide to face the creature head-on at the seemingly haunted house on 29 Neibold Street, where Eddie was attacked by the leper. The Neibold house scene is awesome because it shows each kid confronting Pennywise together. Richie gets locked in a room full of clown dolls, with one particularly familiar-looking doll resembling Tim Curry's Pennywise. Eddie falls through a hole and breaks his arm. Pennywise isolates Bill and Richie in his twisted tricks. We get a moment where Pennywise crawls out of a fridge contorted like a spider and dances towards the kids. It's in these final moments that Beverly impales Pennywise through the head with a fence post. The creature retreats, injured, into the well. They've won this battle, but not the war. Quiet before the storm, the group enjoys a late summer of friendship. There's a touching montage of them swimming and just being kids, offering a breather, but Pennywise isn't done. It kidnaps Beverly, who had just stood up to her abusive father, using her as bait to draw the losers back for a final confrontation. In the film's climax, the losers descend into an eerie underground lair beneath an old well, where they find Beverly in a catatonic state, hovering in midair, caught in the deadlights. In rescuing her, they provoke Pennywise for another battle. The entity assumes horrific forms, attacking them with each of their fears. Importantly, the kids realize Pennywise's power comes from fear itself, and if they stand together without fear, It can't win. They literally beat the clown down in a cathartic group effort, and at one point, It even tries to bargain with, taking the form of Georgie to tug at Bill's guilt, but Bill finds closure in this moment, acknowledges that the creature isn't his brother, and shoots Georgie in the head. Ultimately, cornered and wounded, Pennywise gives the losers a creepy smile and says, "Fear," before falling into a pit and disappearing. The monster is vanquished, at least for now. The kids stick to their promise and form a circle, and each swear a blood oath to return to Derry if It ever returns, before slicing their palms and clasping hands. The film ends on that note of both victory and foreboding. Beverly mentions she's had a vision of them fighting It again as adults, hinting at Chapter 2 to come. Unlike the novel, Chapter 1 completely omits the supernatural ritual of Chud or any mention of cosmic origins, since those were deemed too esoteric for the first film. There's a tiny Easter egg for book readers in the form of a Lego turtle that Bill picks up, but it's very subtle. Also, the film changes Mike Hanlon's role a little bit. In the book, Mike's the one who researches Derry's history, but in the movie, Ben is the history buff who has looked up old newspapers, since Mike's character arc was focused around his struggles on his family farm. Therefore, it's actually Ben who explains Derry's cursed past to the group, mentioning tragedies like the Black Spot and the Ironworks in passing. These details are lightly touched on, whereas the novel delved deeper. Another difference is that the bully Henry Bowers is shown falling down the well in the Neibolt house during a fight, seemingly to his death, which sets up his absence for most of the next film, though he isn't quite dead. Overall, Chapter 1 trims away subplots like the Henry versus Mike racial tensions and Patrick Hochstetter's disturbing backstory to maintain a brisk pace. Aside from the story, the movie made headlines for its enormous success. It smashed box office records, grossing over $700 million worldwide, to become the highest-grossing horror movie ever at the global box office. Critics praised the young cast's chemistry, the film's nostalgic yet terrifying atmosphere. Of course, Bill Skarsgård's take on Pennywise earned acclaim for reinventing the monster. Skarsgård's Pennywise is less jokey than Curry's. He's more like a predatory animal in a clown suit. Odd tics, a drooling grin, and unsettling childlike giggles can turn into demonic snarls in an instant. It Chapter 2. Given the runaway success of Chapter 1, it was only a matter of time, approximately 27 years, before It Chapter 2 hit theaters in 2019 to complete the saga. Chapter 2 jumps to 2016 in the story, and the Losers Club are all grown up, living disparate lives, and, as per Derry's strange magic, mostly have forgotten the horrors of their child. Only Mike Hanlon remains in Derry, acting as the lighthouse keeper of memories and watching for its return. During a local carnival, a gay man named Adrian Mellon is violently attacked by local thugs and thrown off a bridge, only to be finished off by Pennywise in the canal below. This scene, pulled straight from King's novel, prompts Mike to sound the alarm. He calls his friends one by one, delivering a message they never wanted to hear. It's back. The adult losers react with shock, denial, and even nausea as the repressed memories flood back. Nonetheless, almost all of them feel compelled, some supernaturally so, to return to Derry. Over the Chinese dinner sequence, Mike reveals that Pennywise can only be stopped by an ancient ritual. He's spent years researching Derry's history and believes the Native American ritual of Chud, alluded to in the novel but presented differently here, might trap and kill it for good. The catch is that each of them must find a personal artifact from their past in Derry to use in the ritual. This quest structure sends the characters off on individual journeys around town, which smartly allows the film to explore their lingering traumas and give Pennywise opportunities to isolate and terrorize them one by one. Thus, much of Chapter 2 has the losers confronting their past fears, literally and figurative. We won't get into the details, but yeah, not everything goes smoothly. Stan Uris, tragically, never makes it to Derry and takes his own life rather than face it again, a heartbreaking development that hangs over the group. And Henry Bowers, the psychotic bully from their childhood, makes an appearance as well. Having survived his sewer encounter and been locked in an asylum for 27 years, Henry is freed by it, in ghostly Pennywise form, returns every bit as unhinged. He manages to attack Eddie and Mike at the library, where Eddie is wounded. In a darkly comedic turn, he kills Henry with his own knife before Henry can finish off Mike. Bowers' rampage in the film is brief and violent, closing the book on that human evil so that the focus can shift fully to the otherworldly evil below. The final act brings the losers back to the decrepit Neibolt house, down into Derry's cavernous sewer cisterns for the climactic confrontation. Mike has prepared a native ritual box and explains they'll perform the ritual of Chud with their tokens. In an intense scene, they form a circle, burn their artifacts, and chant incantations, and for a moment it even seems to work, trapping its essence in a supernatural jar, until Pennywise breaks free. Turns out Mike was hiding the fact that the ritual failed for the natives long ago. It takes on its true form, a huge half-clown, half-spider abomination, complete with the glowing deadlights in its mouth. The losers are thrown into a desperate battle across multiple levels of its lair, which by now resembles a hellish cavern littered with circus props and past victims. Pennywise uses the deadlights to nearly capture Richie. A heart-stopping moment, Richie is caught frozen staring into the lights, but Eddie saves him by hurling a spear that injures Pennywise. That heroic act costs Eddie his life, and it mortally wounds him in retaliation, devastating the group. With their friend dying and their initial plan foiled, the remaining losers improvise a new way to fight it. They choose courage over fear. Remembering that it feeds on belief in its power, they turn the tables by confronting Pennywise with its own worst fear, being seen as small and weak. In a strangely poetic bit of psychological warfare, the 5 survivors encircle Pennywise and hurl every insult and defiant truth at it like, "You're just a clown. You're nothing without our fear," essentially bullying the bully, and it works. Pennywise physically shrinks in size, from a giant spider clown to a human-sized clown to a withered infant-like husk. This allows the losers to literally reach in and tear out its heart together, finally killing the ancient evil once and for all. They hold hands as it dies, ensuring it knows it was beaten by their unity and courage. As it perishes, the lair begins to crumble. The survivors barely escape the collapsing Neibold house, and tragically, they must leave Eddie's body behind, saying a tearful goodbye. On the surface, Derry seems oddly brighter. The curse is lifted, and unlike the novel, the film doesn't depict a destructive storm, but we sense that something has fundamentally changed in the town. In the days that follow, the losers, now truly winners, one could say, bid farewell and go back to their old lives. They don't forget this time. In fact, they all receive posthumous letters from Stan, who reveals he took himself off the board early so that his friends would be brave enough to stick together, which was nothing less than a final emotional gut punch that underlines their bond. Beverly leaves her unhappy marriage and goes off with Ben, yes, January Ember's Ben, now slim and successful, their childhood love finally realized. Richie carves an old secret initial on the kissing bridge, hinting at his own personal growth and grief. Bill, now free of his writer's block and survivor's guilt, starts writing a new story, perhaps one that sounds a lot like It. The film ends on a poignant, hopeful note. These characters, traumatized as they were, have found closure and lasting friendship. And as for Pennywise, he's nothing more than a bad memory and a creepy carnival relic in the town's history, for now. Well, It Chapter 2 didn't quite capture the lightning-in-a-bottle hype of Chapter 1, some found it less scary or too long, it was still a major success. It grossed over $470 million globally, making the 2-part It series one of the highest-grossing horror franchises ever. The film packed in plenty of Easter eggs for fans, from a Stephen King cameo where he plays a curmudgeonly shopkeeper who even makes a joke about Bill's bad ending, to a cameo by the original young Ben actor, and it provided a satisfying sense of closure to the loser's story. We get to see the promise fulfilled and evil vanquished. Importantly, for our purposes, Pennywise was defeated for good in 2016, bringing the modern story to an end. This means the upcoming series won't tread further into the future. Instead, it's taking us back to the past to discover earlier nightmares that Derry long ago tried to forget. A new nightmare begins. It, Welcome to Derry. With the Losers Club saga complete, the It franchise is turning its eyes back to Derry's past. Back, or should we say way back. It, Welcome to Derry, is an upcoming series coming to HBO Max on October 26, 2025, and it serves as a prequel to the films. If you ever wondered about all those dark historical events mentioned in King's novel, the ones Mike Hanlon researched, like the Black Spot Fire or the Kitchener Ironworks explosion, this series plans to dive into those untold stories. The show is set in 1962, which, intriguingly, is exactly 27 years before the events of It Chapter 1. The film's timeline set the kid's story in 1989. That means we're likely about to witness Pennywise's feeding cycle before Bill and the gang, an earlier generation's encounter with Derry's resident evil. And yes, Pennywise will be back. Bill Skarsgård is confirmed to reprise his role as the demonic clown. Those early rumors that he wouldn't return can float away. So what can we expect from Welcome to Derry? In tone, it aims to be as dark, suspenseful, and character-driven as the films, essentially It, but with fresh faces and new nightmares. Andy and Barbara Muschetti, the sibling team who directed and produced the movies, are executive producing the series, with Andy set to direct several episodes, including the pilot. They've teamed up with co-developers Jason Fuchs and Brad Caleb Kane as showrunners. In other words, the creative DNA of the hit films is intact, virtually guaranteeing a consistent feel, high production values, creepy atmosphere, and respect for King's lore. One major storyline the series will cover is the burning of the Black Spot. In King's novel, the Black Spot was a nightclub founded by black soldiers stationed near Derry in the 1930s, and it was burned down by a hate-calling loss of life, including Mike Hanlon's parents. King's book said that Pennywise's malevolent influence was present during that tragedy, suggesting that the entity fans the flames of human hatred. Welcome to Derry appears to have shifted this event to the 60s and made it a centerpiece of Season 1. The teaser trailer even shows the club's sign, a glimpse of the fire's aftermath. This means the show isn't just about Pennywise eating kids, although we'll get plenty of clown time. It's also tackling real-world horror like racism and violence, filtered through King's supernatural lens. In an interview, Series star Taylor Page mentions the show will blend historical fiction with horror, implying it will address 1960s social issues while delivering the scares. We'll likely meet a new group of young protagonists, perhaps similar to the Losers Club, but of their own time, who begin to notice something wrong in Derry. The cast includes actors like Taylor Page, Jovan Adepo, Chris Chalk, James Remar, Madeline Stowe, and more, populating Derry in the era of rotary phones and Cold War anxieties. Speaking of anxieties, we already have a clever King Easter egg in the trailer in the form of a Derry High School sign that says Bert the Turtle says duck and cover. On the surface, it's a cute reference to 1960s nuclear safety drills, but Stephen King aficionados know the turtle is a reference to Maturin the Turtle, cosmic entity of good that counterbalances Pennywise's evil, and also the one who helped the losers in the Ritual of Chud in the novel. Could this be a sly hint that the show will acknowledge the wider cosmic battle hinted at in the book? It's possible the writers are planting little breadcrumbs for the hardcore fans tracking the metaphysical lore. At the very least, it shows the showrunners have done their homework and aren't afraid to wink at the deep cuts of King's universe. The series also promises to explore Pennywise's origin story, something only briefly hinted at in the novel and never shown in the films. There's a shot in one trailer that some think depicts Pennywise's arrival on Earth, perhaps a flashback to millions of years ago. It fell to Earth like a meteor. If Welcome to Derry truly gives us Pennywise Year 1, that alone will be worth the price of admission for fans. The possibilities are amazing and horrifying, and because it's HBO, we can expect the show to have the freedom to be as bloody and intense as it needs to be, more in line with the film's tone than network TV. Creative team has hinted that each season, should the series continue, could jump to a different era of Derry's history. Season 1 is set in 1962, but future seasons might tackle the 1930s, the Bradley Gang shootout perhaps, or even the early 1900s with the mysterious Kitchener Ironworks explosion from 1908. This format means Welcome to Derry could become an anthology of Pennywise's cycles through time, which is a thrilling prospect for Stephen King readers who know just how far back Derry's darkness goes. Why should you and I be excited? For one, Welcome to Derry isn't a simple rehash of what we've seen. It's digging into new territory within King's canon. We're going to witness stories that were only talked about in whispers before. It's a chance to see Derry's evil from a fresh perspective, possibly through the eyes of characters who don't have the plot armor being in King's novel. That could make the horror even more unpredictable. Plus, with Pennywise's 27-year cycle in full swing during the 60s, the show can unleash the clown at the height of his powers, with no Bill Denbrough around yet to challenge him. Even Stephen King himself has given the project his blessing, saying he's intrigued to see more stories in that world. King isn't shy about calling out bad adaptations, so that's a good sign. Ultimately, Welcome to Derry has the potential to be more than nostalgia bait. Marvelous verdict! Now that you know Derry's troubled past, from the Losers Club triumphing over Pennywise to the dark decades that came before, you're fully prepped to venture into it. Welcome to Derry. The new series will take you deeper into Derry's heart of darkness, unearthing secrets that even the losers didn't. Armed with this recap, you'll catch references, understand the history, appreciate just how deeply Pennywise's evil runs in that cursed town. Just remember, in Derry, nothing stays buried for long. Evil has a way of resurfacing, whether it's 27 years later or in the echoes of the past. So watch this show with the lights off, keep an eye on those storm drains, perhaps think twice the next time you see a balloon bobbing in the breeze. As we return to Derry, we may be going back in time, but the scares are all too present. See you in Derry. Be careful, you'll float again. That's all we got for you this time, but don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.